The tip-off about the job. WHEN TV5, now WTVH, was adding a 6 p.m. broadcast to their Saturday and Sunday schedule and was pulling together a full news team, an anchor, sports guy, and a weather forecaster. The news director at WHEN, the CBS affiliate, had a budget for a, quote, college kid or a drunk, end quote, which is why I was allowed to audition for the weekend weather gig in the first place. To be clear, I was a college student, not a drunk. I was never a stand around with a brewski chatting about sports with the guys kind of guy. Other than the occasional glass of fruit punch at the Rathskeller, our college bar, it would be many years before I started drinking in earnest. By the time I was introduced to some of the finer libations, the Pim's Cup, the Gatsby-esque gin and tonic, the where have you been all my life deliciousness of the Aperol Spritz, I was married and had 3 children. Dr. O'Donnell, or Doc, as all the students called him, was an excellent professor, but his notoriety around campus came from his second job, his side hustle. Every afternoon, after wrapping up a day of teaching classes, grading papers, and holding office hours, he'd head to the WHEN studios, where he'd place a miniature trolley over his head. It covered everything except his eyes, which peeked out of the trolley mask like eerie little globes. His nose, covered by a red bulb, was the trolley's headlight. He strapped a little cow catcher beneath his chin, and his transformation from distinguished department head to Mr. Trolley of the Magic Toy Shop was complete. In case you aren't familiar, a cow catcher does not catch cows per se. A cow catcher is actually a metal frame attached to the front of a train to move aside cows or any other major obstacles that might be in the way. You imagine what that would look like for just a second. Mr. Trolley's voice had the timbre of Goofy with side notes of the lion from The Wizard of Oz. It was not at all how Dr. O'Donnell sounded in class when leading a discussion about communication theory. SUNY Oswego's graphic design teacher, Socrates Sampson, yes, that was his real name, played his jovial sidekick, Eddie Flumnum, and they were joined in song by Merrily and her magic music box, who was played by Marilyn Herr, the station's public affairs director. The trio became very popular, despite the fact they sang chipper songs that were actually cloaked in darkness. They sang about teddy bear picnics and how it's best to not go into the woods. And dear God, if you do go, don't go alone. Really, please, everyone, just stay home. Apparently, back in the 1960s and 70s, terror was the way to get children to tune into a TV show. Doc had been doing this since 1955, and the Magic Toy Shop had become the most popular local children's television show in history. No one has beat it to this day. Years later, Doc O'Donnell would say, "Al, say what you will, but that trolley paid for my kid's college." Andy Brigham, the news director at WHEN, had asked Mr. Trolley if any of his students might fit the bill. In other words, who could do a decent job of pointing at a weather map on local TV for $40 a weekend. O'Donnell tapped me and 3 lucky others. We were all earnest communications majors. None of us were the sorority girl-chasing, raging kegger jock types who would be too busy partying on weekends to show up for the weather forecast. You know, nerds. We were all a fairly safe bet. We took turns practicing our weather forecasts using 2 large maps made for us by none other than sidekick extraordinaire Eddie Flumnum himself. We switched back and forth between the map of the United States and a New York State map. We practiced pointing while speaking to the camera, swooping our hands down to the map to emphasize low pressure. Rain is coming! Resist the allure of suede, people! Then we'd try it again, this time adding our most dazzling smiles. We kept pointing, speaking, smiling, until Doc O'Donnell felt satisfied with our performances. Finally, we each recorded a tape of our forecast for the news director in the studios of Lanigan Hall. Lanigan Hall was a fairly new facility that housed the public radio station. It contained several studios outfitted with various hand-me-down equipment. But for an AV nerd from Queens who had never seen so much equipment in one place, my mind was blown. Tape